Okay, this is the 26th of February, and it's about what time of day is it?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, and we're recording this on the back patio behind Denver's house and store. And Jerry's upstairs right now trying to pacify Warner, who's should be going to sleep by this time, but he's not. And Linda's over at Yerkes at our house with Graham, who's kind of been sick for 2 or 3 days. Denver and I are here, and we're going to talk a little bit about some stories that happened relating to when you were in the service. And start out by asking you, let's see, what period of time now were you in high school? What years?
Oh, I don't know, 37, 38, 39, 40. About 39, I think.
Graduated in 39.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now that's the year that the war started in Europe. So do you remember pretty distinctly being aware, say when you were in high school, of that there was going to be a war, or there was about to be a war in Europe? Did you see that on the news?
No, not really. I knew Germany was going into Poland, and went into Russia, and then pretty soon, of course, we were dragged into it.
Right.
Actually by the Japanese, and bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941. And I went in, let's see, I believe it was May 13th, 1941, and Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in December, yeah. Now, I'd been in 6 months before Pearl Harbor. That's right.
You didn't have a fear then that there was going to be a war before it actually got started?
Not really. Not really. They was drafting people then. I decided, well, I was going to be drafted. They were drafting. I went in 6 or 8 months ahead of the draft.
When did they start drafting? Then in 1940 sometime?
They must have been. I don't really remember, but they were drafting. I'd registered and had my draft card and everything, and I decided to just join. Since I could get in the Air Force if I joined a little early, that I could pick my place, so I joined the Air Force. That's why.
Well, did you already have an interest at that time in airplanes?
Oh, not really. I'd been in an airplane one time. A couple of $1 ride down here at Combs.
Who had the plane? Do you remember?
I don't remember who that was.
Was it what kind of plane?
A little old Cub had a drag wheel. It didn't have a wheel. It had this little old drag wheel on the rear. I remember that. That was, several years.
2-passenger plane?
Yeah, 2-passenger plane, all it was.
And you rode that when you were a boy?
Yeah, that's right. But I never even had any idea that I'd ever become an Air Force pilot. After I got in, though, I really got interested in it after I got in the service. Seeing all these boys, hot rod pilots all over the place, and lieutenants and officers, and flying, the privileges they had, and didn't have to do a lot of spit and polish. That in the Air Force, it's like the infantry. If you don't fly, well, you do a lot of spit and polish.
Right. Well, what was it that caused you to want to enlist then?
Just like I said, I wanted to enlist so I could pick the service I wanted. I didn't want to get in the infantry. I wanted to get in the Air Force.
So you could avoid being drafted.
That's right.
And you could do what you wanted to do.
That's right.
Now, what about your brother? What was he doing at this time?
RB was running the drugstore at Hyde, and he was just a little bit of, he was quite a few years older than I was, and they weren't drafting. He was a little bit out of the draft age. Right tail end of the war, they got up to his age group. He was examined. He never did have to go. He still flies. He flew then and still flies now. He's got his own airplane in here.
Did a lot of the people that you grew up with and ran around with, did they enlist at about the same time you did, or did that have any influence on you?
No, my first cousin, me and him decided to go together. We went to down at Fort Thomas, Kentucky, enlisted, and were sent to Charlotte, North Carolina, basic training.
Now that was an Army
It was an Air Force base at that time. It was brand new, called it Morris Field. Long about that time, really, I got interested in flying while I was at Morris Field. I was going through recruit training, drilling every day, and serving KP and all this stuff, and a lot of young lieutenants just graduated from Air Force school in Texas, Randolph Air Force Base, and they sent them to Marshfield flying P-41s. And I was out there, after I got through basic training, I went on the line to help service those planes. When they come in, we'd gas them up. I was the guy driving a gas truck, gassing those planes up every day, and I really got interested in flying then, watching those really young boys, the youngest I was, or younger, flying those P-47, that really appealed to me.
Right, you wanted to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you went through basic training, I'm sure.
Now, you're speaking of basic flying training?
Well, no, what's
I went through basic infantry training. I went through it at Morris Air Force Base right there. We had it right there. 6 weeks.
After that, did you have any doubts about if you're doing the right thing?
Boy, I'll tell you, after basic training, and then they put you on KP for about 2 weeks after the first thing they did after you got a basic training, and I was wanting to see Hazard again after basic training, KP.
Name some of the planes that they had there on that first base you were at.
First base they had one old B-18. That was a real relic. At that time I heard, you know, other pilots and people talking that they had just 3 or 4 of those, and they kept crashing them down and crashing them, and there's only one left. And it was at Morris Field. It's twin engine, something like a forerunner to the C-47, twin engine C-47. It's sort of like it. We called it old B-18. And every chance I got, anytime that thing was going, I'd ask the pilot or the crew chief. I got to acquaint the crew chief real well, and I'd ask him if he could take me along. And I was on KP at this particular time, and I'd been a servicing plane, but he told me to make them up a lot of sandwiches, and they were going to fly over to Knoxville and back from Charlotte maybe that afternoon. So I was on KP, and I got around to the cooks and got them to fix them a lot of sandwiches. And I got a trip all the way over, and coming over with Smokies. I was sitting in the nose wheel of that thing, and they called down to me and told everybody to put their chutes on. They was having a little trouble with that thing. We might have to bail out.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I put my chute on, said the rest of the time we landed at Knoxville and stayed a few hours and then flew back, never had no more trouble.
What, was the engine trouble you had?
He said it was something, one of them was smoking. He thought he might have to shut it down, but anyway, I found out later they started wanting to get rid of it anyway. They wanted to crash it so they could get something newer. That's what it was talked around on the base.
Really what happened?
Yeah.
Okay, what other planes do you remember? They have fighters and bombers there? Or?
Yeah, let's see. I remember seeing my first P-38 there, that twin boom thing. Somebody flew some of those in there, but all we had stationed there really was that old B-18 and some P-51s, and they occasionally, I believe that's all we had there, little P-51s.
You were there how long at that base?
I was there for about 6 or 8 months, something like that. Basic training, and I took examination for aviation cadets while I was there. I qualified. I was servicing airplanes all this time, gassing them up.
So you were there December 7th, 41.
That's right, but I was home on furlough.
Oh, you were
I was here I lived down here at Yerkes, and I was home on furlough when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And
you remember where you were and how you heard it?
Yeah, my sister. I got up next morning. Sister came down. She lived at Busy, and I lived at Yerkes. She came down and told me the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and they were calling all personnel that are on furlough to report back. And I turned my radio on, and pretty soon I heard the same message. So I went on back to Charlotte, North Carolina. And
did that shake you up pretty bad? Were you afraid, or you just felt
it
like
must have shook our squadron up, because they moved out of Charlotte, moved over at Myrtle Beach, and I went in there, and my whole barrack was empty. There I sat in my bunk and all my stuff.
And you didn't even know about that?
No, they'd moved, and they came back after another load of equipment, and I jumped on that truck and went back with them over to Myrtle Beach. That's where we were. Stayed there till a few weeks, and then come back to Charlotte, and then
Was there a big change in attitude when you got back, say, to Myrtle Beach because of what the Japanese had done?
Yes, they seemed to be
serious.
Yeah, they were pretty serious. And then we theoretically went to Myrtle Beach to guard the beach, you know, with our P-41s, but they hardly had any guns on them or anything else. We couldn't have shot down a kite, but that's what they put us over there for.
Okay, then what happened? How long were you there?
We were there just a few weeks, and things settled down, and we moved back to Charlotte, and then I went from Charlotte to San Antonio, Randolph Air Force Base. I'd qualified for cadets, and they finally called my group, and I went to Randolph Air Force Base for pre-flight training.
That's in Texas?
That's in Texas. They call it Kelly Field.
What's the closest town?
That was San Antonio.
San Antonio.
Yeah, we had a big, the cadets had a big recreation room in a hotel there. They called it the Silver Wings. We'd go there every Sunday.
Is that a base that had been there a long time?
It's up on, they call it up on the hill, but Randolph Air Force Base has been there for years and years and years. That's where we went to, but I went to pre-flight section of it, which they call it, it's just up on a big mesa up on top of the hill overlooking Randolph. And we had pre-flight training there. It lasted 8 weeks, I believe it was.
How did that base compare to the Charlotte?
Well, it was just completely a drill field. All it was in barracks. We had it just laid off in blocks, hundreds of barracks and thousands of cadets, aviation cadets. They were pilot training for pilot. All of these were, and we stayed there. I believe it lasted 8 weeks. You'd drill a half a day in calisthenics, march to eat your lunch, and it was really a rough life. You had to tow right to the cadet like they did in all of these big military schools. You had all this military courtesy to learn. You marched to eat, and you sat to eat. You had to eat up on 6 inches your stool, eat a square meal. And if you wanted something food, you didn't just reach and get it. You asked the gunner, or somebody on the end would call the gunner, tell the gunner to pass you the food, and he'd bring it back. Nobody could touch it. If you called for something, it comes straight to you.
What did you think about that? Was that making you nervous, or did that bother you?
It was a rough life, but I was born down in the country. Used to run up down these hills, and we'd run 3 or 4 miles. It didn't bother me, but some of the other boys. No, calisthenics. We'd have calisthenics there each day, and have a close order drill, a couple of hours. And then we'd have military courtesy an hour. Then we'd have school. We'd study navigation, meteorology, aircraft recognition, and navigation, and all the things that went with flying. We weren't in airplanes at this time. We were just studying for it.
Okay.
This is just called basic pre-flight training. Then from there, I went to what they call basic flying training. From there, I went to Parks Air College at Saxton, Missouri. It was a civilian school. I think it's still there. I'm not sure, but it was a civilian school. We flew these PT-19s, Fairchild, little open cockpit thing that had a little plexiglass front, and we had to wear goggles because the hood, you didn't have any hood over your head because the wind would be, stuck your head out, you get your eyeball blown out.
That's what you actually learned to fly.
I actually learned to fly this PT-19A Fairchild, and we went to school half a day there and flew half a day there. Went to ground school, studied navigation, same thing, navigation, meteorology, aircraft recognition, mathematics, and even studied all the world's aircraft and all the world's ships, like Japanese, Nagasaki. Yeah, we had to know all that stuff. Japanese, the silhouette, they'd flash it on a screen, we'd have to recognize it. And of course, we had a test every week on all that stuff. If you didn't make at least 75, you didn't get to go to have open post on the weekend, and we didn't get to go into Saxton, which is a town smaller than Hassett. That was, I had to take that privilege away from
night life there. Huh?
Yeah, if we didn't make 75 on ground school, of course we'd fly half a day, but you got graded each day on your flying, but you didn't know what grade you were making. Your instructor would turn that into his superiors, however you were progressing flying. And since then I found out if you got along all right, you never was bothered about how you were flying, was it? When we wore goggles each evening when we come in flying, you pull your goggles down around your neck. But when you soloed, you were allowed to put them up, wear them up where they're supposed to be. So anytime you come in the evening with your goggles up where they're supposed to be, the other cadets would grab you and throw you in the shower. Or throw you in the fish pond one outside.
Part of the routine.
That's just part of the hazing. And I remember I had 9, 10 hours, something like that, this day that I soloed, around 10 hours, and we'd go out to auxiliary field. We had a main field, and we'd go out to auxiliary field to practice landings and takeoffs, which I'd been doing for the past 10 hours, you know, every day. And I had no idea I was going to solo that day, and my instructor, he was a civilian instructor, and we landed, and he said, pull up over here, and he got out and pulled his parachute off, and just slung it across his shoulder, hopped out on the wing, and jumped down and said, take off. He said, I'm going to let you kid yourself. I'm going to let you kid yourself. I just took off, as soon as I'd touch, he'd wave me on again. I made 5 or 6 landings before made the final one, you know. I just what you call touch and go.
Right.
And finally, yeah, just touch and go. I landed, and he got in, and I'd soloed 10.5 hours, something like that. And then,
did you have to overcome some fears to be able to fly a plane? Did you have a big fear of heights?
Not a bit of fear in the world. No way. I never had a bit of fear. Not a bit. Never got sick or anything. Air sick. Never made me. Never had any fear at all. That's what I wanted to do.
What about you mentioned the plane now that you learned how? Is that training plane one that just about everybody had to learn on, no matter what kind of plane they ended up flying?
That's about the same thing. All the pilots started out, even the bomber pilots, fighter pilots, transport pilots. All of them started out on flying basic PT-19 Fairchilds, and back further than that they had some old biplanes. We had a few of them there. I didn't start out on. That was the basic. That was a principal primary flight trainer. Now the next step was I went to basic training. I had BT-13As. Had about I think they were 425 or 450 horsepower. They were just. I compare the PT-19 to a Fairchild. PT-19 to a BT-13A is about like stepping in a A-model Ford would be the PT-19A and getting in a Rolls Royce. When you push the throttle on that BT-13A, it just purred, where this other little small plane just pop along, you know. But it was great, just a great transition. I had a little trouble
making the transition.
Yeah, I had coming in for landing. Seemed like I had a little trouble when I come around and level off. I'd S it around a little bit for a few times. It just wasn't what I.
By this time, had you kind of decided what kind of plane you'd hope to be flying sometime?
No.
Do you have a favorite plane?
No, it never entered my mind. After you get to the final phase of flying, here's what happened. I flew this BT-13A 60 hours, and I switched from that. Instead of going on up to advanced training and get in bombers and fighters, I dropped out of that and went into L5s. I wanted to, you know, get into it quick. Things got to get over with.
Right.
And they wanted some liaison pilots, so they pulled a lot of us out that would be willing to be pulled out. I could have probably refused, but I went into liaison, got my wings in about 8 weeks, I guess it was, and made a staff sergeant with the liaison wings, and went from there to Statesboro, Georgia, in a big pool of liaison pilots. And then they picked a squadron out of there, and we went overseas from there.
So what year would that have been you went overseas? About
1944.
1944.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, 1944. Yeah, I went overseas in 1944.
Okay, where did you go first?
We crossed over to England, and we stayed in England about during the Battle of the Bulge. Now, we were in England. They were fighting the Battle of the Bulge over there on the continent, France. The Germans had surrounded but a lot of our troops there, and they was fighting the Battle of the Bulge, I remember. And then we went across the channel in a LST and those troop carriers, LSI, landed on the beach, and we rolled our...
Into France?
Yeah, into France. We rolled our Jeeps and all of our equipment into France, and we went in Tent City there, and stayed in Tent City a few weeks. And they told us we hadn't been in an airplane for over a month, about a month, and I'd say 2 months, coming across and over the channel, over into France, Tent City, and it'd been 2 months since we'd been in an airplane, and we got 32 new airplanes. And they sent 32 of us pilots back. I don't know, it wasn't across the channel. We had a pretty good foothold in France. Somewhere, I don't even remember where they took us in some C-47. We picked up their new airplanes, and we flew this little old grass field. I hadn't been in an airplane in a month. And it felt so strange. I looked down and seen that little old field. And all of us, we finally landed on it. Half of it, you'd overshoot and come in and land. We hadn't practiced, you know, flown it in 2 months. And I thought they was going to shoot me there. We all felt the same way. I asked the other pilot.
Couldn't get it down, huh?
No, but you know, just like anything else, you lose your touch after being out flying for so long.
So by the time that you first landed in Europe, did the Allies have the upper hand in the war at that point, or was it still?
Let's see, when we landed in England, they'd crossed the channel, had a good foothold, yeah, and the only setback, you know, we had right then at this particular time was that Battle of the Bulge, and it was going against us pretty bad, but everybody knew that this was just a little flea bite. Germans was they were on their last legs. They were completely whipped. They just made a spurt there, and they caused a lot of casualties and killed a lot of our troops. Of course, after we broke out of there, well, it was just a cakewalk all into Berlin. Well, it really wasn't. We went across the Rhine then. After we got our little old airplanes, we started flying missions in and around the front lines, flying high-ranking officers up towards the front, and we'd stay pretty close to the front. Close.
You were doing some of that?
Yeah, I was doing that at this time. That's what we were doing, flying. Well, we'd fly the mail in to different outfits and fly payrolls. High-ranking officers is actually the biggest thing that I did in and around the front lines.
How close to the front line action were you flying?
Well, I've flown close enough to be shot at through mistake. They wouldn't send us over the front lines in the L5 purposely. The intelligence officer would say, now you've got to fly this officer over here, and they're fighting along up here, but I don't think if you go straight, I don't think you'll be over any enemy territory. But if the lines will fluctuate, you know, and a few times we had the colors, what they call the colors of the day. We had a fire pistol in our L5 that would shoot out a little flare that looked like a Roman cannonball. You'd pull the trigger and it'd it'd tell you what color it was, green, red, red, green. And they'd tell us the colors of the day in case our own troops challenges us.
Oh, okay.
Because the Germans had captured a few L5s and had been flying them around. In case they challenged us, they'd challenge. And I got challenged one day by our own troops. They shot out in front of me with some kind of burst, something, and I shot the colors of the day out, and and I went on where I was going.
But you said that you were flying at one point close enough to be shot at. Did they actually shoot the plane?
No, I just puffs of flak hit out close to me, two big puffs right close to me, and I turned around and got back.
Was the visibility good enough to see anything going on down there?
Yeah, I could see it, yeah. No, I could just see puffs of smoke from the ground and knew that they was fighting down there, and I got back out.
What'd be the common altitude you'd fly at for those kind of runs?
Above, I'd stay usually 1,000 foot off the ground, 800 to 1,000 foot. Because if you got any lower, you couldn't, had to navigate by the seat of your pants. We'd have no radio navigation. Right. And I had to use my compass and my map. I'd draw a line on my map and follow that, follow it before I draw my course and everything before I left my radio room. Before I leave my base, I'd have everything planned out, where I was going and exactly the course I was going to fly. And I'd know where the lines were.
Did you ever see any German aircraft up in the air?
Yeah, I saw a dogfight once. I saw an American and a German ME-109, and I was watching them. I was right down on the treetops and kept watching them out in front of me, and they was maneuvering for position. And
against an American fighter?
Yeah, and I said, I thought this German sure was going to shoot him down. I know he knew he'd seen me. I thought he was going to come down and get me. As it went through my mind. Right. Of course, he could never come down on the treetops and got me because the L5 is so maneuverable. Unless he'd slipped up on me, which he couldn't have done. But as long as I could see him, he could never have shot me down, I don't think, because I could outmaneuver. I could just turn like on a dime. How far away
probably was he? Right.
They were, going up and down, I'd say they'd go up 15 or 18,000 foot, and they'd come right back down, just maybe 5, 6, 7,000 foot, maybe up and down, dogfighting. I could see them shooting at each other, see the smoke rolling out of the airplanes.
Did you ever know what happened?
I've been told, or I don't remember either, somebody told me they'd seen the same thing on the ground, some of our squadron, that the Americans shot this ME-109 down. They said, I got that in my mind, that happened. I didn't exactly see it happen, but I believe I saw him hit him. I wasn't sure. But one incident happened about one ME-109, along about the same time I was flying between Cologne and Dusseldorf along there, and they was fighting over there in the rear pocket, not too far from there. And I had a ground force officer, major, in my back seat. I was flying him on a mission, and I'd flown him before. He's a pretty nervous type of fella anyway. And I looked down and saw this ME-109 laying on the ground. You could see him where he'd hit in a big wheat field, where he'd hit and slid several hundred feet right through this field, laying there. It happened a few days before. And yeah, ME-109 was crashed laying, and we was flying over it. And he was peeping through, you know, talking to me, tapped me on the shoulder and asked me about this. And I said, look at that ME-109. He went crazy. Where is it? He thought it was one was up under us fixing to shoot it. I said, no, down there on the ground. He said, don't scare me that way anymore.
That would scared anybody, though.
Yeah. I'd seen it a day or two before. I knew it was there. I don't know how long it had been shot down. But the war was going on. They were fighting pretty close to there. They were fighting in the Ruhr pocket at this time. And a few days after this, we got a mission. General Giroux and he had 2 aides. One of his aides was a pilot. He was a captain, I believe. He was a pilot. He was a grasshopper pilot, what they call a artillery pilot. Mm-hmm. He hadn't gone through the Air Force school, and he didn't know. I didn't say he didn't know, but he didn't navigate like we did. He was trained to spot artillery, these little cubs.
Right.
And we got a mission to fly General Giroux and his aides to Paris and then back to Reims. And me and Sergeant Flip was to fly his aides, and Captain Wright was flying General Giroux. He borrowed one of our L5s. He was fastening his little old cubs. He borrowed one of our L5s, and he's going to lead the general, you know. He's flying the general, he's going to lead. And he wasn't schooled in navigation too well, so he took off on what we call the iron beam. He followed the railroad tracks. He followed the railroad tracks. That's winding around, you know. Of course, you could fly, make a straight line. You see a railroad track way ahead of you, and it's winding around. But anyway, it's a slow way of getting there. L5 cruise about 120 miles an hour, you know, and following the railroad track is pretty slow, waste a lot of time. But we were really, I don't think, in too big a hurry to get to Paris at this particular time. But anyway, he followed it. We landed at Reims, Eisenhower's headquarters at Reims at this time, Schaeff headquarters. We landed at Reims, and then we went on and flew into Paris. Well, coming into Paris, we come to Le Bourget field. I hadn't been into Paris before, and we went into Le Bourget. That's this field that Lindbergh landed at. Famous field. The British were controlling it then. Well, Captain Wright just plowed right on into Le Bourget, you know, without circling the field. We could have called the tower, but we didn't. Nobody called the tower, and he just, first runway he saw, you know, he just streaked right in it, you know. We just streaked right in behind him. We all come down there, and I looked out in front of me, and there was flares like Roman cannonballs hitting all over the runway, bouncing all over the place, and on the end of the other runway, about a mile away, so a twin-engine plane in takeoff position to take off right toward us, you know.
Where were the flares coming from?
Coming from the ground control. They were just trying to stop us. We were landing right into the traffic.
Right.
Okay, we taxied on over there, and I heard a big loudspeaker says, "The aircraft just landed. Would you please report to headquarters?" And I said, Captain Wright come over me and Flip said, "Let's know he's fooling with that." Said, "They'll just send a letter to General Giroux," and he said he'll just show it to me and tear it up. He said, "The news going up there." I said, "Well, me and Flip, we were in the Air Force. They've got our number of airplanes. We better go see what they want." He said, "Okay, go ahead if you want to now, whatever happens." He said, "Don't pay attention to that." I said, "We'll tear it up." Me and Flip went upstairs, and this major, and he went with us. Captain Wright went with us. We talked him into it. He wasn't going to go. And we went up, and we stood there in front of this major's desk, and he says, "I say," he says, "you pilots that just landed those aircraft, said, don't you know the elementary flying rules?" Captain Wright spoke up. He says, "Where we come from, we just get in and out the best way we can." Said, "We've been flying off of grass fields and cow pastures." Said, he said, "You landed right into a bunch of aircraft that's fixing to take off." He said, I say, "What squadron are you fellows from?" He said, "We fly for General Giroux, the 15th Army Group." He said, "He's taking all this down, you know." He said, and he's going to report us and had us something done to us, I guess,
Right.
busted or so forth. But I think I talked to Lieutenant Wright, or Captain Wright, a month or so after that. And he said he did get a letter, and he said they did just what he said. General Joe showed it to me too. Yeah, he was reporting us for traffic violations, all kinds of things. But the next day now, they this particular incident, a lot of things happened on this particular incident. It was interesting. General Joe had his Packard drive in from Germany to meet us. He's sitting right there at the airport waiting on us. We got in, and me and Flip got in the back seat, and Captain and General Joe and them got in the front seat and drove through Paris, flying off there, just like it's going to life and death matter, you know, to get there. Went to the Ritz Hotel. General, his age, got out and stayed at this big fancy hotel, and they built it. Me and Flip across the street in a nice hotel. He said, "Now I want you boys to be here 9 o'clock in the morning, you pilots and you driver." He told me and Flip, and General Joe told us this. 9 o'clock. So next morning, me and Flip got up and ate breakfast and walked over to the hotel. And there sat the Packard and his driver, and me and Flip leaned up against Packard waiting for General and his aides to come out. Pretty soon, General come busting out the front door. "Where's my aides?" He's called him gravel voice Harmon. He said, "Where's my aides?" He's cussing his every breath. And Flip said, we haven't seen him. We've been waiting on you." He went back in the hotel, but it wasn't 5 minutes later. Aides come out of there, buttoning shirts, putting ties on. They'd keep out of bed. He cussed them all to pieces. We got in the back end of that Packard, and he cussed all the way to the airplanes.
Never did call them.
No, he's mad. He's going to be late. Cut your time too short. And we got there, and that Captain Wright called Flip, said, "I want one of you boys to navigate over for." He said, said, "I can't afford to follow the railroad track. We in a hurry." Flip navigated us over to Reims. We went over to Reims and stayed most of the day. What they were planning, we flew back into Germany that day and landed. A day or two later, they had a big drop right there in the Ruhr pocket. They had the Germans surrounded, and what they went over there for, General Eisenhower's headquarters, to plan this drop. And they put it in motion the next day, and I was flying up and down the Rhine and watching them drop.
You saw all that?
Yeah, I saw it happen. I didn't know at this time what we was over there for. Of course, it wasn't none about me. My business just to fly his aides over there, man.
I guess you had to put up a lot of hard to get along with officers that you had to fly around, didn't you?
Well, the biggest problem, they were ground force officers, and they knew they didn't know anything about flying, most of them, and they left all that to us. They didn't really give us a hard time, except there was one major that gave us all a hard time. He thought he could navigate, thought he knew where he wanted to go, and we'd all, when a mission come to fly him, we'd all try to say, "When I flew him last time, you flew at your time." Yeah, we'd pass him around. We would swing around, you know, the front. We would, where it bulged front, we wouldn't fly across it. He'd try to get us to fly across it.
Did any of the flying buddies that were flying with you those same kind of planes, did any of those people have accidents or get shot down, or anything happen to any of the people that you were?
In my squadron, there's a few boys shot at. None of them were shot down. None of our squadron were shot down. None of them were killed by enemy fire. 2 of our squadron were killed by accidents. Out of 32 pilots, we lost 2, but that one was coming in for landing in a strange airplane he never had flown before, and he lost control of it and killed himself. And another one just had an accident. Weather, I think, got lost in weather and just forced landing and run into some trees and things, killed himself. Just 2 pilots out of 32 is all we
lost. You were a lot safer area than, say, if you'd been in any other country.
Yeah, if I had been flying a fighter plane or a bomber, why, chances are.
Would not been nearly as
no, we stayed away from the enemy fire. We didn't have no business flying over enemy lines.
Did you get to see and enjoy a lot of France and England?
Oh
and Germany when you were there?
Oh yeah, I saw all the sites just about. I went through the Reims Cathedral, which is world famous, and I went down on the Riviera, stayed there at Nice for about a month after the war was over, and stayed in Marseille, and we went to England. I saw all the sites there in England, the changing of the guard, and the Thames, and the London Bridge, and the Big Ben.
Right.
We had it was really, I had a lot of enjoyable times. It was.
What about the food? Do you have any trouble getting used to different kind of food, or did you
No, we
Army food?
We ate really good. We ate with the generals, usually General Giroux headquarters, because we were flying for him,
Right.
and he had good headquarters, and we would stay 15, 20 miles back from the front, and they always had really good food. We ate real well.
Tell me about that time that you stayed a few days in a German farmhouse. How did that happen? Where were you going, and how'd you end up there?
Well, we would, like I say, we would move with the front. We would move up closer. You know, we were in Luxembourg at one time, and then we moved from Luxembourg to Hilden, Germany. This little Hilden, Germany, a little village about like Combs down here, and they had a lot of farmhouses, big farms there. And we moved into a 3-store farmhouse, and the Germans that owned it, they had some tenant houses. The people, we just moved them out, and they moved into a tenant house. And on the farm, it was about like something like you would own a big farm in Lexington, and you know that's
Right.
about what they were. They were rich farmers,
Right.
and they took all their clothing, and food, and everything with them, except they left a lot of their dishes. And we took their. They had a big clover field out there. It looked like about, I'd say 30, 40 acre clover field. They used it for silage. We took his own reaper, and we made a big X right through his clover for landing strip. That clover was waist high, and after we cut it down, they came in and raked it up and used it, of course. And we used it for a little landing strip. We had about 6 airplanes. There was 6 of us pilots, Captain Burgett. And we flew there for the general's occupation army. They had a lot of deer around there. I remember I killed a deer, and we brought it in. They had a meat house in their basement. We salted it down just like you'd salt a hog down. And we'd fry it. Yeah, we fried it. And they had 8 or 10 cows, milk cows. They milked the cows and set the milk out in a little milk house. We'd drink the milk, fry that deer at night.
What happened to the family?
Like I said, they moved into a tenant house.
Oh, they moved into tenant.
Yeah, right on the same farm.
Okay.
Yeah, they moved out.
Did they offer any kind of resistance to you, or they just
not a thing in the world?
choice?
No, we didn't even. It wasn't. We got the occupation. We told them the house we wanted, and the American forces that occupied that territory controlled it. The control officer, he moved them out. And we moved in. We didn't even see them. Never even see them. We found their dishes and everything. A lot of them they didn't take with them.
Right.
We knew where they were and knew who they were.
Right. What you mentioned something about a car that you found in the garage?
Yeah, right there we found an old Chevrolet truck, and we found a Volkswagen, and we got this Volkswagen out. It had a gear shift on the dashboard. We got that thing out and fueled it up and drove it all over the place. We finally got the gears hung in it, left it sitting out in the wheat field out there.
That was a car, right?
That was a car. Well, we got this German Chevrolet truck when we left there.
Was that a truck they had captured, or?
No, this old German farmer had it right in the shed, in his hay shed. He'd used it for years and years. This old truck, 36, 37, ton and a half. And we appropriated it when we left there. We didn't have enough room to put all our junk in. We'd accumulated so much stuff. And we was going back, we left there, this particular place, we left there and went back to France. The war was over there then. We were right there when the war ended. We celebrated right there in the German farmhouse at the end of the World War II in Germany. And I remember one of the boys got out, got shooting these flare guns, and shot into their hay shed, set their hay shed on fire, celebrate that night. But anyway, we took this old Chevrolet and we drove it. We was going to drive it from Germany down to Marseille, France. We got down there, way down the line. I was only one of the pilots that had a license to drive a truck. Yeah. And we had 3 or 4 boys that were gassed their airplanes up. They didn't fly, but they went along with me, and we went down there. We took this old German Chevrolet truck, and it broke down on us about 50 miles out of Marseille, down the Rhone Valley there. And there's GIs stationed everywhere, going and coming. And they redeploying them to the theater of war over there where they were fighting Japan.
Right.
CBI, I believe they call it. anyway, this old Chevrolet broke down with us, and we left one of the little boy, corporal, with it. And he just had a T-shirt on. It was warm up in the spring. It was in June, I believe, May, June. And had a T-shirt on, and he's in the Air Force, you know. He never wore no nothing. He didn't know. And we sent him up to Motor Pool with an NR Jeep to try to find a part for this old Chevrolet. It broke down on. And buddy, they kept him there all day. He didn't take identification with him. Just had a T-shirt on and
didn't have dog tag.
No dog tag, nothing. And he said he thought he never would get out of that place. They wouldn't let him eat or anything else. Finally called around down. Already got a hold of Captain Burgett. He told them who to call, and finally, after several hours, they let him alone. They come to find out the old Chevrolet had broke a timing sprocket or something. They couldn't fix it. We left it sitting there. I sent a pile of stuff up through the waterway we didn't want. Come on in to Marseille, and we stayed at Marseille till the war was over in Japan.
Right. What kind of relics did you see? What would be now called relics, of course. I'm talking about from the enemy side that had been abandoned. I know you mentioned that.
Oh, gee, oh yeah. There at this old.
Thousands of things.
Yeah, we was right on the edge of the Ruhr pocket, and a lot of Germans was surrendering, coming out of there in droves, coming right by our place, marching 3 or 4 abreast in droves. And they had thrown down everything they had, even helmets. And I saw hundreds of copies of this Mein Kampf, this book at Hitler, and people tried to burn them, and there's rifles all over the place, and there's all kinds of vehicles around this old farm where the fighting had passed in. There's foxholes on this farm all over it, and landmines. I saw a landmine laying right out on the ground. And
see any tanks?
Yeah, I saw 2 German Tiger, big old Tiger tanks abandoned, and a cook from our squadron on off duty went over there fooling around on these Tiger tanks, and a shell blew up on him, and we lost the cook. It didn't kill him. It just they had to send him back to England to hospital. We lost the cook. And the main squadron. But anyway, there's 2 of those Tiger tanks during that breakthrough. They got up right close to our little old airstrip, and they knocked them out.
You like to cook now. Did you ever do any cooking at all while you were in?
When I was on KP there at Morris Field, yeah, when I was on KP there, they put me in the mess hall in the supply room, and the mess sergeant would send me in there to get stuff, and he'd come in, and he'd sit down and told me a lot of things, how to cook a lot of things, especially chili and things I make now. And he gave me this real good recipe on this homemade barbecue sauce. Now I learned that from, that's where I learned that. But really I was interested in flying though. Right. I was interested in getting out of there.
Tell me about some of the things that you sent back or brought back with you, like the rifle.
Yeah, at all these rifles. Yeah, where the Germans would give up there in the Ruhr, they threw all the rifles and their daggers and everything in the world. They just piles of them. And they had rifles that were made real fast. They weren't really good ones. And I went through. I knew what I was looking for. The boy, it was a rifle that told me to look for one made in 1937, 38, 39, there before the Germans, before the war. And I found a 1938 Mauser. A beautiful thing, has a curly stock on it, and I got that. And the bayonet goes with it, I got it. And I took it apart and shipped it home along with a lot of other little things I got out of German farmhouse. A little 32 Walter pistol.
You shipped those back to your dad?
Shipped it back to my dad, and I have them all now except that 32 Walter, and I gave it to Flip. He wanted it. After I got back home, he wrote me a letter and asked me if I'd let him have it. I sent it to this boy in upstate New York.
Rifle, the Mauser?
Yeah, that's what I killed that deer with there.
Did you ever shoot it after you got back?
Yeah, I've took it over to the old farm down there at Yerkes, and I shot it several times. I've got about 50 round ammunition for it.
What's the caliber?
It's a 31 caliber. It's a Mauser 31. Ours was 30-30. Now the Germans are pretty smart. They got that Mauser rifle, 31 caliber. They could shoot our 30-30 in it, go in it. But 31 was just half a caliber too big to go in our 30-30. Just 31 caliber.
Was most of the GIs you were over there with, most of them bring some stuff back? Was that common?
Yeah, we call it scrounging. We'd get out and scrounge around the evening when we were off duty. We'd go out to a German factory. I found a American P-47 sitting in a German hangar. The hangar had been bombed out, and it wasn't flyable. It was in pretty good shape. I took the magnetic compass, the gyro compass off of it, and put it on my airplane. It's really easier to fly a gyro than it is a magnetic. Magnetic compass bounces around, and gyro compass is holds straight and true. I put it on my airplane. I tried to beat the fellas off of my airplane. They always wanted to fly it. Yeah, I had that gyro compass on.
Was there restrictions about what you could send back?
Yes, there was restrictions. Okay, you couldn't send an automatic rifle back unless you'd bore holes in the barrel, make it inoperative, or you couldn't send an automatic rifle back. You could send just about anything else back, but that was the only thing I could remember restricted. I could send any kind of souvenir I wanted to send back. No kind of explosive, no shells. You could send that back. But I sent a whole box of stuff. I just threw everything I could think of in it, and I still got a lot of trinkets. Some things I didn't even know what they were. I got out of the old German farmhouse.
You think that any American soldiers were able to bring back a vehicle of any kind, or was that just out of the
Well, they did everything else. I don't see why they couldn't have done that. Ship it piece by piece, but I don't think they did.
They tried everything else.
Yeah, anything could be thought of. Gee, I'd think they could do it.
Did you write a lot of letters back home?
Yeah, I wrote my dad almost at least once a week, and he'd write me once a week. And my sisters, I'd write them and my brother about once a month. Ruford and Merle and Frida.
They wrote you?
They wrote me, yeah. Yeah, I wrote at least once a week to my dad.
Were they real concerned about your safety, or?
Yes, they were. Really, they were.
They probably didn't know exactly what you were doing.
After Americans captured the Ruhr pocket there at industrial Germany, after they captured it, there was 2 or 3 chaplains came to our squadron, wanted to fly over and see it. They were churchmen, but they were a colonel. One of them was a colonel, but he's in the chaplain corps, you know. And he asked me to fly him. I flew him. Flew the other, and somebody flew the other. But I flew him up over the Ruhr pocket to Essen. That was right in the center of all the big German artillery works in industrial Germany. It was Essen. I flew him over Essen. I've got some pictures of Essen. You've probably seen them. With this, the Krup's home. I've got a picture of his home and all of his big cars sitting around Arrowview. Have you seen it? Well, I've got that picture. I'll show it to you sometime. I flew him up over it and showed him the Krupp works and everything, and he came back and he referring to being scared and everything. I told him, I said, now you tell me. He said, he got my father's address and everything. He said, I'll get in touch with your father and tell him that you flew me over a Ruhr pocket and was, you know, showed me all these things and so forth. And I said, well, be sure to tell him that you see, I'm not in danger. We're just flying here just like it would be in the States. And he did. He wrote, after I got back, I asked Dad about that and said he wrote a big long letter and told him about me flying him up over Ruhr pocket, and I was not in danger. The war was pretty near over then anyway.
Right.
So they weren't too apprehensive about my
Were you
flying.
ever in contact with the prisoner of war, German captured soldiers, or?
After the war was over there, they had right down there on the Rhine River, where the Air River, the Koblenz, where the Air River runs into the Rhine. Had big German PW camp. But the French, I believe, the Germans were right out in a big open field, thousands of them in barbed wire. Just in little old, it really was pitiful to look at them. Right. And a few weeks later, we was going somewhere in a Jeep. I don't remember who it was. I was out on the main highway, me and some of the boys, and they were marching they were closing down this camp and taking the prisoners to France. They was marching them all the way from the Rhine River into France. And they were just a ragtag bunch. Really, you were sorry for them, because the German civilians would throw them a loaf of bread or something, they'd all be fighting over it. It really was, and the French would be whacking them over the head with a rifle, knocking them back in line. I saw a lot of that going. Yeah, it was rough on them.
Well, then after the war ended in Europe and 45, May of 45. How much longer did you stay in Europe?
Let's see, I stayed all the rest of that year. We left Germany and went to our headquarters in Paris then. Went to Paris, headquarters. We had at Orly Field, big field there at Paris. We had a headquarters there. And they sent me and Flip, the same B flight, back down to Marseille on detached service, just like we'd been all during the war. We never stayed with our headquarters squadron. Headquarters squadron usually was in Reims and Paris and different big cities, but our flight stayed out on detached service right up close to the front. They sent me and a bunch of us down to Marseille on detached service. We were flying for redeploying troops to the CBI, Theater of War.
Were you concerned that you'd have to go there, or was that not a possibility?
No, that wasn't a possibility, I don't think, because they'd had trouble getting little L5s over there, and they had plenty in the CBI anyway.
Right.
We had big pool of replacement pilots in the state, so I had points enough to come home on at that time anyway, practically. We were flying for the redeployment center. They were redeploying troops troops that just arrived in Europe, hadn't had any combat duty. They redeploying them fast, and we were at Marseille. They put them on boats there, and we were flying we were flying back to some of them was over maybe around Bordeaux. We flew the payroll over to Bordeaux and go to Paris, get the mail, just missions like that.
Was Marseille, was that where the black market was so hot?
Oh, gee, I never saw anything like that before in my life. There at Marseille was a city that had an awful lot of Africans, Senegalese. The French had a lot of Senegalese troops, and a lot of there were thousands of those people there, colored Senegalese. And you could, if you on the street to Marseille, every 5 minutes they'd bump into you and say, you got something to sell, Joe? Cigarette, Joe? How much? How much, Joe? You speak, Joe. That's about all the English actually.
Everybody was Joe, huh?
Everybody was Joe. You speak, Joe. G.I. Joe. Well, a pack of cigarettes would bring you $10.
Is that right?
Yeah, a good pack. I sold a pack I had a pack of Pal razor blades and 4 or 5 bars of candy that the rats had been chewing around on. And they didn't use that bag. Pal razor blades had rusted, and a carton of cigarettes. I believe they were Raleighs that I couldn't smoke. I smoked then. I couldn't smoke. Nobody else wanted. And I sold that bunch of junk to one of those Senegalese troops there for $50. Cigarettes for $30, and he gave me $20 for the rest of your razor blades and candy bars, black market. And they were.
Who were they selling to when they'd buy these things?
They would sell to see the French didn't have anything then. The war had been going on a long time, and the French all the manufacturing had been knocked out. They didn't have anything. A pair of nylon hose would bring $25, but they didn't have any cigarettes or nothing like that. And they just sell to anybody, French civilians, anybody. You could take a parachute, silk parachute, and get $100 out of it. We had a lot of parachutes that were dropped there in Germany were disposable, and they'd bring them back to us. Thought that they were supposed to be returned. Well, we sold them on the black market, and they divided the money, and I got $100. I don't know how much it had sold. They divided the money and give me $100. But
tell me about was it 1 or 2 accidents you had in an airplane, and when did that happen?
That happened before I went overseas. One accident I had, we were stationed at Fort Belvoir, just outside of Washington, D.C. We were flying for this engineering school, Belvoir Engineering School. They'd send troops from all over the United States there, from privates to majors. A camouflage course. They had it laid out there, and we'd take these officers and students up and fly them over this camouflage course and see if they could recognize a gun from the air, and so they could camouflage their troops and guns better. Really, what it was for. And I had this captain, I believe, he had his troops. He had them all out in the field, his whole company, and he had them camouflaged. And he come and I flew him over, We circled around over him, and he saw what he wanted to see, and he said, he told me that was enough. We circled him, I guess, half an hour. And I was up about 500 foot. I usually stayed 500 foot. That's the regulations. You're not supposed to fly under 500 foot unless you landing or take off. That's CAA regulations and the Air Force regulations. Well, anyway, I just was up at 500 feet, and she said that's all. I just dove down right down in on them, right on the treetops, and just pulled right straight back up and laid on full throttle. Just I laid on full throttle, and the motor just rolled out. Lost it completely.
Came right out of the
Came
plane.
right out of the plane and hit the trees. I learned later that there's a lieutenant standing there in this tree, and it took all the limbs out of that tree and hit right down at his feet almost.
The prop was on the motor? Or?
Yeah, the whole prop, cowling, motor, everything. It just broke off right level with my plexiglass window right out in front of me. It just broke off. Left the controls, wires and things hanging up all over the place. But anyway, this lieutenant said it hit about a couple of feet from him, almost hit it. Took this tree, he said, just tore this tree down just about. He's standing under the tree. But anyway, it was quiet, and he reached through and patted me on the shoulder. He says, "What happened? What happened?" This captain did. I said, "We lost the motor, lost her engine." He said, "What do you mean, it stopped?" I said, "No." I said, "We lost." I said, "The wings, we were in the wings and the fuselage, and the motor gone the other way." And just quiet, but I didn't realize it. I had control over it. It didn't.
Flying level at this point, or what?
Yeah.
After it dropped down.
After it dropped down, I gained a little more altitude and pushed the stick full forward. It has a control on it that you can wind your weight forward. And I wound the weight full forward. It has a balance weight on it. I wound the weight full forward, and I found out I had lateral control. I had vertical control. And he said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "We got to ride it down. We're too close to bail out." And there's clearing in the woods there, and I hit just as pretty as you please right in the, I landed, made a 3-point landing. But there's a tank trap right at the end of this clearing.
What is a tank trap?
Well, that's where these engineering troops had practiced making traps to stop a tank, and that it stopped me. I run right into it.
What's it made out of?
Made out of big timbers set up into the ground. I run right into that and flipped right up on my nose and right up against it.
How fast you
I wasn't going but about 25, 30. It cut me on the knee here and in the head, and it broke his arm. No, it did. But just as soon as we hadn't even tried to get out, the troops was all around us. His troops was. They came out, and they had ambulance and everything right there. They took us straight into the hospital, and I stayed in about 10 days. And he was out walking around next day or two, come over and visited me. He just had his arm in a cast. They let him out before they did me. But my knee was stiff for a few days.
Didn't cause any lasting problem with you then?
Well, yeah, this knee is still act up. Yeah, I draw compensation for it yet. I draw compensation.
Didn't break any bones?
No, just got a gash in my head and this sort of cracked the kneecap there a little bit.
And then you have another
yeah.
mishap where you hurt your back?
Yeah, about 3 months before this happened, we were stationed at Stateside, Georgia, just after I got out of flying school. I was flying we were flying the L-5, same thing, and the air commanding officer told us that if we'd made up a lot of flare sack bombs, and he said there was a National Guard outfit over there in the woods wanted us to fly over them and see if we could see them and drop these flare sack bombs on them, just for practice,
Right.
So he took off, and I took off second plane behind him. We got in a V formation. I was on the right, the plane over here, and we flew over there, and we dumped this boy was with me, Fred Jones from Raleigh, North Carolina. He was a pilot, but he just went along to throw the flare sack bombs out, and he threw all of our bombs out, and they said if we'd come in and land on the highway there, they would give us a big steak dinner. So captain circled around, come in, he landed, and the boy on his left circled, and he came in and landed, and I was coming in right in behind him, trying to land, and he just kept slowing down, and I just kept throttling back, and there's a little bridge coming up, and he got on the ground, and before he could pull off, I couldn't land. That hit him, so I just laid the throttle on, went around, come back around, and I got way back and too far. And there's a wire straight across from
Power line?
There's a guy wire. There's a power line run through there, but it's run parallel with it, but the guy wire went straight across. and I dropped back a little farther. I got, and I just coming right straight in for it. I was going to land, be sure I had plenty of room to land, but I looked out and saw this guy war right in front of me, 2 legs, of course. My right wing hit it, and he just spun the plane around. He hit the highway backwards, slid right down the highway, right up in the ditch on its side, and it completely total wrecked the airplane. And it hurt my back, and the boy, Fred, in the back seat, Sergeant Jones, it broke his back, and he's in the hospital in a body cast for 6 months. And I wrote him a letter after the war was over, and he never did go overseas. He got back, he's back on duty, and they discharged him and gave him a disability.
What did it do to your back?
It dislocated a vertebrae. They had, it was sore it was a sore. When I did start back flying, I'd had to put my leg up on the rudder to start flying again. It was that sore, my back was. But anyway, it still bothers me. But
it didn't knock you out?
No, I never did. No. And Fred Jones is dead now. His widow told me that he had cancer of the liver. He died. I was going to get in touch with him.
Now both of those happened pretty close to each other.
About less than 2 months, around 2 months was the time.
Both of them in North Carolina?
No, one in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, outside of Washington, D.C., and the other one outside of Statesboro, Georgia.
That didn't diminish your love of flying at all?
No, not at all. You know, after you're in an accident, some Air Force regulation requires you to go see a psychiatrist. So I went through that. See that you're not crazy, you know. And they give you a check ride, a flight test.
What
yeah.
did they do on that?
I knew him real well. I could fly as good as he could, but he was one rank above me, and he said, Sergeant Campbell, you've got to go out and give you your flight check after that accident. What are you gonna do? He said, formation flying. He said, if you can fly formation, you ain't skittish. We took off, and he said, follow me, and I followed him, and he told me to close it up, and it did feel sort of funny the first time, you know. It's a little skittish getting in there to him.
Yeah.
But after we flew about 45 minutes, I just put it right in on his ear, or my left wing. So, and we just went in all kinds of maneuvers in formation. If you can do that, well, you're not scared of flying.
Right.
So that's it.
Never had any other trouble?
No, not a bit in the world. But like I said, when I got overseas and hadn't flown for 2 months, it feels a little strange to get in one. But that's about it, about all I...
You mentioned one time an airplane, the German plane that you found somewhere, the Fiedler Story.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Where was that?
Yeah, Sergeant Capasso, he was a flying bug all his life before he went in the service. That's how he got his wings. He already had a lot of flying time. And he'd seen one demonstrated in the United States. He's from New Jersey. And he'd seen one demonstrated. He knew all about it. Well, somehow or another, he found one. When we was there at Hilton, Germany, he found one somewhere abandoned, good shape. He flew it in. And he left it idling. I walked up to it and stuck my head in. It was pretty high up into you had to climb up stirrups to get in the thing on the struts. Mm-hmm. And I peeped my head in it. He said, come on in and fly it. He said, there's no problem to fly this thing. You can't get hurt in it. He left it windmilling, just left it idling. I climbed in the front seat and I said, well, these are German instruments. What am I going to cruise at? I'm going to fly it. He said, don't pay no attention to nothing. He said, it won't stall. You can't stall it. He said, you can't get hurt. Just lay the throttle on it and go. He said, come in, he brakes on if you want to. It'll slide to a stop. And my mechanic, a real good Indian boy, climbed in the back seat with me. We flew it around a long time. I come in, landed, and we kept it, I guess. We were there another 2 or 3 more weeks, or maybe a month. But I believe me and Capasso was the only 2 flew that thing. I don't remember Flipper flying it, none of the other boys. They may have, but we flew it. It was a real gawky thing. It landed at about 30 or 35 miles an hour. Had a big sprocket chain. You could wind pull your flaps on, and the ailerons would droop 10 more degrees. That'd give you that much slower speed to land in.
They ran off a chain?
Ran off with a big sprocket chain. Right up there just wind them down. It was an ugly looking thing.
Well, had that been a private plane, or was that a military plane?
It was a military plane. The Germans used it. They rescued Mussolini on top of a mountain with that thing. Landed in a courtyard. You could land in a 50-foot circle. In a 50-foot circle, you could land. You could land in it and hold your brakes, full brakes, and it would slide. It wouldn't nose over. But L5, you did that, you'd nose over on
Go
you.
right on
Yeah, you on grass, L5 would slide on grass. It was, you could put your brakes on, but now you put your brakes on, you're going fast on L5, it would slide, but you slow down a little bit, you'd nose right on over. But that thing wouldn't nose over.
So when did you get back in the States then?
We got back in the States, so I ate Christmas dinner in '45 in New Jersey. Camp Kilmer.
Is this close to the time that you first went to New York? When did you visit New York City?
Oh, I visited New York City when we were stationed at Statesboro, Georgia.
Okay, before you went to
Before I went overseas, yeah, I visited New York City. Stayed there a weekend.
Tell me about that story. That's a classic story.
Let's see. The one about, I went to this Pepsi Cola Center right in Times Square. All the GIs, you go there and get free Pepsi Cola, and the sandwich didn't cost hardly anything. And they give you out a little ticket to find a place, billet, they call it, a place to stay all night. They gave me a little billet showing that where it was, way down on 17th and something out close to, what's that big park?
Central Park.
Central Park. It was close to Central Park. Well, I got on the bus and I went to Lucky Strike Hit Parade that night and saw it. I'd always heard it all my life on the radio, and I went to the Hit Parade that night, and it was getting pretty late.
Who'd you see there? Do you remember any idea?
Yeah, it was John Stafford and Kay Kaiser. That's who it was. Kay Kaiser and his College of Musical Knowledge.
Is that
yeah, that's who it was, I believe. John Stafford was, I believe, was the girl singer. I remember that. But anyway,
it's a big band.
It was a big band. Anyway, it was late at night when I got out of there, and I caught the bus and went right. I went to the hotel to start with, and they gave me a little ticket, and put my shaved, cleaned up, and come back, saw the Hit Parade, and then got back on the bus, went back to the hotel and got off, and walked around this block where it was, and it wasn't there. And the hotel wasn't there. And I walked back to where I got off and walked down another block and walked around this square, and it wasn't there. And I come back and walked around this one again, it wasn't there. And I come back up another one around, it wasn't there. And I'd left my ticket there, and I didn't know the name of the hotel, so I couldn't ask anybody I met where this hotel was, because I didn't know the name of it. Couldn't remember it. Just a small hotel, 25, maybe 50 rooms or less.
What time of night was this?
This was getting to be about 2 or 3 o'clock at night before I found it. I had on these cadet shoes, and by the time I found it, I'd wore holes in my shoes. I finally found it. It had a little awning over it. That's the only thing. I'd walked till I wouldn't see an awning down this block, and I knew that wasn't it. I just kept going until I finally found it. 3 or 4 hours.
You walked all over New York City.
I walked all over New York City before I found it. I was about to give up. I knew it had to be on some of them blocks there, but I hadn't gone further enough up. I'd got off a little too far down.
Any of the people that you were in service with, did you see people that were, real badly affected by being in a war? Did you see emotional problems?
No, not a bit in the world. Of course, I guess I guess because we were back and we had a good place to sleep at night. Where them boys in the infantry, they slept out in foxholes and rain and snow, and you could see where they could easily have emotional problems. Where we lived in, we'd pick out a good home. We lived in good German homes and lived comfortable. A lot of times, we had homes better than most people had. We'd pick out the best ones, of course, live in.
Right. What one thing would you say was the thing you enjoyed most about being in the service? Just being able to fly, or being able to see different countries?
I believe I see in different countries. I had, saw all the things there in England to see, and I saw in Europe. I went through Germany and England, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and all those countries, and Riviera. Anything that you see in paper about Europe, usually I can relate to it because I've been there, I've seen it. I believe that was my biggest thing about being in the service. I don't fly now, hardly any.
At least at one point you were keeping in contact. I guess you still do with Flip.
Yeah, I keep in contact with this boy that's such a good friend of mine. Another lives in Cincinnati. Flip lives in upstate New York, outside of Lockport, New York. I hear from him real often. Still, I got a Christmas card from him and a letter. And he's coming to Florida, I believe, this coming spring. He's going to stop by and visit me.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, him and his family. His wife, his son's married.
Were you the only one from Kentucky in that particular group that you knew?
No, there's a boy from Gracie, Kentucky, wherever that is. I think it's over around Paducah, in that part of the country. But he had never been to Hazard. No, he was a nice boy.
Were you able to keep up with sports or anything while you were overseas? Did you have any idea what was going on in baseball or UK or?
No, I didn't keep up with UK at all. We kept up loosely. We knew about the World Series, about all.
Right.
Yeah, we kept up with that. Most of us, you know, kept up with the World Series, but some of the boys football, but I wasn't interested in football.
Right. UK didn't have the reputation they've got now. There wasn't that many people following it.
No, they didn't say much about UK football or basketball, neither one, especially basketball. What that I was interested in.
Okay. Well, I guess that'll wrap it up. This is again the 26th, I think, right? Of February.
About
Sunday
3:30.
afternoon. It's about 3:30. That'll do it.
Oh.
You have to unpin you as they do on.
Yeah, I don't want to take off. Destroy your macros. Here, I can get off there.
It still clips on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, now if we can find that little piece. There it is, thank you.
Rolling in.
Yeah, I found it'd be cool to roll. You can cut this ice down.
Vern, how did you, when you were talking, how did the sound get over?
That was close enough for it to pick up.
Oh,
Yeah.
You'll sound better than him though.
yeah.
Because you're